podcast listeners, if you hear my voice right now, I need you to do something for me. I want you to take out your phone or on your computer, go to Apple Podcasts, search for Ask Your Oldhead podcast. You'll see my logo, my little picture, my little image there. Find the show. Please rate and write a review. It's a small thing, but it helps others find this work and find what I'm doing here. And it really, really matters, as small as that may seem. So if you can please do that before we get into the show, I would much appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Let's get into it. Peace. Hey, peace. Before we get into this episode, this is usually where I'm speaking to my good brother Majestic and we get started with our conversation. But I just wanted to give you the front end. We're going to be discussing the District 33 strike in Philadelphia. And as you all know, at the time of this, you're probably listening to this, the strike has ended and there'll be, there's been some agreements. This recording was done in the moment. And due to that, the resolution time, we were not sure. So please take the best part for yourself. But just a fair warning, fair knowledge. But I think our thoughts on the situation are still relevant and hopefully engaging. So do the knowledge, take the best part for yourself. Peace. Peace. I'm Majestic.
My brother, Justice Rajee.
So, today I wanted to add on with you about, and I think it's salient and relevant, and there's a lot of layers, or not a layer. I don't know. It's not that many layers. So, in the city of Philadelphia, your home, rooted land of birth. My like I say, your Delaware Valley folks from the other side of the river. But still is a place that always has cultural and personal relevance, to what's happening. But also I think important in this moment, and even sort of in light of some of the other things we've talked about recently, and even though I don't think there's a direct relationship to the big beautiful bill, in this conversation, we probably should talk about that at some point, now that it's actually passed. But in any event, we'll get to that later. District Council 33, which is the joint labor council of several different, it's several different local unions in Philadelphia, is on strike. They went on strike on Tuesday. Is the most visible group of that is those that handle trash in the city and refuse, collection, garbage collection, cleaning the streets, those sorts of things. But it's like 9,000 workers. It's the first. This is the first full. I mean, there was a short strike. Was there a strike? I think in that article, and was it the Rendell one, the last actual strike? Okay.
Yeah.
And I forgot, when you sent me that and it had the picture from 86 when the trash was all, I forgot about that. Yeah, I mean, when that happened in 86 a little bit, but it was like, oh yeah, that's right. Cause I remember, growing up where we grew up, the whole the America thing, as I like to call it, with the 4th of July, is like people come from all over the country sometimes to come be like, yeah, we're going to go do 4th of July in Philadelphia, go to the period of 776 and, go to the ring the bell or see somebody ring the bell and Ben Franklin.
Yeah, niggas ain't running the bell in a minute, but yeah.
Yeah. All that stuff. So I had a little moment there, but I think it's important because it's a lot here. One is labor and labor power. There's, the reality of what folks are really being paid to do work, and work that, we had this whole moment with COVID with essential workers and trying to actually recognize the value of jobs that often aren't paid the most, but are closest to some of the day-to-day functioning of our society and access to the stuff you need, meaning the people to make sure that the food is in the store, that the trash is out the way, that the streets is clean, that things are picked up, things go where they need to go. A lot of the functional comforts, even one could say that definitely those who make more money get to like sort of benefit from at very low cost. Often also, you know, our cultural, and I'm saying it's cultural as a whole United States, and you know, and I might wager, you know, a larger part of the industrial world of sort of having a negative perception, having a full negative perception or association with like these are jobs since they pay less. Not only are the people who work them like paid less because of what the job is, that like those are the only jobs they can have, right? So we got a lot of wild stuff. I guess I would say, right? All right. So I said all that to say, you know, they ready to rock. The videos I've seen, the clips, the news stories, and also there's a powerful, is you know, and I don't know. I mean, I in my heart, in my mind, and just growing up where we grew up, you know, because our unions are not much different across the river in New Jersey in terms of like it's we about to go on strike, it's a strike. And everybody, or if we, you know, they go into war, you know, going to battle for you know, negotiating, you know, it's hard edge, it's hard knocks, it's bare knuckles, it's a scrap. And I don't know if, but there seems to be a level of public support for the union that for the union workers that I do think is significantly different than maybe even 10 years ago if something like this happened. So, all right, I think that's enough setup. Which are some of your thoughts seeing some of this unfold and like comes to mind and for you?
Yeah, thank you for that framing for the world. A couple things. So one, it's the idea of labor, and I think if we talk about labor over the last about 16 years, give or take. And actually, you know, let me take that back. I'm gonna go about 20. And the reason I'm gonna go about 20 is I think prior to the early 2000s, when most people thought of labor unions, they probably thought of Italians or the Irish, right? And so it kind of speaks to the racial element in unions. And we've discussed how, you know, in many ways in America, unions have been used as racial protectionism, like straight up and down. So when you think about it, you think about the Irish firefighters or the Irish police or, you know, some labor union that's doing something, and it usually was racial. I would say it was only about 20 years ago when SEIU, the Service Employees Industry Union, really kind of reframed unionism around building power for jobs for people who were in unions who were not traditionally seen. And so I take this all the way back to 2004, actually, with the hip hop political convention that was held in Newark, New Jersey. And it was actually underwritten by SEIU, and they had a whole kind of theory of change and theory of the case around how you build power with people of color, as they would say, you know, and unions, you know what I mean? And how you would lift that up. And I think you've seen over the last 20 years a much more keen awareness in different communities of the power of unions. And that ranges from kind of what we're talking about now, and kind of SEIU healthcare folks talking about, you know, janitors, talking about doormen, you know, just a range of stuff. Folks unionizing for Amazon. So we've seen a lot in that way. And then also when the election this year was a huge thing around 2024 election, there was a huge thing around the unions and where people were going and how unions were split. And for the first time, the actual positioning on a union was separate to race, right? It was separate to the cultural, the cultural context, right? So race and culture. So the first time you've seen unions who, you know, President Biden was the most union president ever and still didn't get the support of certain unions because culturally folks went with President Trump. So I think we've seen this. So we've seen unions, and as you well know, in local elections, unions play a really, really big role in who gets elected, right? Council people, mayors, Congress people, school board members. Like, it really matters, right? Where labor is. So I wanted to frame this kind of like in the bigger understanding of that. And I think people's pushing, and as part of this whole populism conversation that still exists in many different forms, right? It continues to show up. I think in some ways, the support for unions, which has never been higher, is a representation of this idea of populism, even from people who are not in labor. Mm-hmm. So setting that context, I think it's important here to think about what it means when you have unions that aren't fighting against the man. So, we've seen everyone fighting against Chrysler or Stellantis, and people are like, yeah, shut it down, right? Yeah. And people like fighting against Bezos, shut him down, right? Everybody loves that kind of thing. But then you get to like municipal unions, and people who are like, we're not going to pick your trash up. People are like, whoa, wait, okay, hold on a second. Like, you could do the other shit, yeah, bang on them, but services, right? Now, Philadelphia being very unique and being one of those traditional union towns, and also Philadelphia having some of the first Black unions, and mostly Black unions, because it is important here to note that district, DC 33 is mostly Black, negotiating for a contract with a plurality Black city and a Black mayor. Mm-hmm. So the idea of what this means, not as a figment of your imagination, that you won't get your, or I won't get my books from Amazon in, 48 hours, 26 hours, down to a very real thing on the ground. And I think to kind of like bringing that to bear within the context of a city. And to your point, thinking about the wages. Because, sometimes we always come up thinking that like labor is fighting for something unrealistic or fighting for just a little bit more until you realize what DC 33 actually makes. Mm. And again, you can't get away from race in this context. Race and like, Black mayor, Black city council person, Black this, Black that in the city of Philadelphia. But the mostly Black union is the lowest paid union of all the unions. Mm-hmm. Right? Yep. And they don't go through arbitration. So they don't get the ability just to go to arbitrators. They actually have to fight it out, which is what we're seeing.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting in this moment. And for one, like watching some of the news clippings, reading some of the stories, and then juxtaposing it to my own environment, right? Sometimes it's hard to see how a culture of a place, or you might not remember, especially when you haven't lived somewhere for a while, but you have a sense, right? Like, all right, there's a behavioral difference, right, in regions or places, and you can go, oh, well, people are just doing that. It's like, nah, but like the more visceral, like close to the bone sort of understanding. And so like reading some of the stories and watching some of the clips, it's like, oh yeah, like this. At a place that has had a different formation of like the process through like the industrialization age and like all these other structures. So like, and something that you reminded me in our offline conversation about, like, that like Philly is like a place a lot of times if you work for the city, you got to live in the city, right? And people, we have some roles like that in some municipalities here, but mostly you don't. Right, unless there's some service things where you got to be a city, like live in that city to serve on. But most of like the jobs that are in the city, you don't necessarily have to live in the city, right? And and these things are rules that exist to serve a reason. Like there was a circumstance, there was a concern, either one about money going out of the city, like there's like these layers of like planning and coordination and like policy ideas, like why this is important. So you have a city like Philadelphia, with its size and scale, its other features and facts, which we're not gonna go all into the weeds on today, but if someone is constrained by where they have to live in order to, keep their job role.
Yeah.
The planning aspect of like, well, is the city affordable? Right? Is the space work? Right? And then in some of our structural assumptions that, like, again, living somewhere like here that is in a, has been an attention point of national dialogue, and in many ways folks throw out as this sort of like testament to the failures of neoliberalism and or liberal policy, because I always kind of cracks me up that neoliberalism has somehow stuck to liberal politics in an odd way, I guess, because of Bill Clinton, in a way that, like, but liberalism didn't really come from liberals. Like, liberalism was like the free market and the global whatever. That's like that was like
the University of Chicago, right? The University of Chicago Economic School doesn't have much to do with our current politics, but they get put together.
Yeah, it gets put together. So, like, most people now, they say neoliberals, they point to Portland and liberal like cities, California, and I'm like, hey, y'all know that's from University of Chicago shit. That ain't no classic liberal.
But that's also we start throwing around terms again that we don't have historical context for.
Yeah,
like most people will talk about neoliberalism, but like if you don't understand the University of Chicago and laissez-faire politics and how that became part of the landscape, right? Or even things like affordable housing tax credits, and that was introduced by a Republican in '86.
Yeah.
That became part of liberal politics for reasons of creating housing, right, when the quote unquote market would not create housing.
Yeah. And so like what I was, where I was going with that is like when the issue, there's a heightened sense of energy that you can feel, not just in the reporting, but even in the mannerisms, the style, like the understanding of like sort of the constraint and the structure of the space that you're in, that is markedly different than a place like Portland, right? Just the way things are laid out. So if one of our, like, I think one of the city of Portland, one of the unions wasn't a negotiation. I mean, we've had teacher, I think the teacher, Portland Public School Teachers Union went on strike. I guess that was 2 years ago during their negotiation. I'm trying to think if there's been I don't think that there's been a like full strike of a big union in the like outside of the teacher space in like the last couple of years here. But I guess, all right, let me get through where I'm going.
So one thing I want to touch on to your point that you just brought up is this idea of what's happening now. And I actually do a through line to Mamdani in New York, because they're both representations of an idea, of a reality, actually, not just an idea, that cities are not affordable for the people who traditionally have made them up. Right? Like spaces that were affordable 20 years ago are no longer affordable. Right? And you're seeing a variety of responses to that basic reality, that cities are not affordable. In New York, you got people to vote to say the city is unaffordable, basically just a premise of the city is unaffordable. And someone should do something about it. Now, some of the people who said the city is unaffordable are people who have made the city unaffordable, ironically, for other people. Right? And, we have a variety of newcomers to cities of all kinds, whether they're educated or uneducated, whether they come in middle class, working class, folks that are barely surviving. But that election was an election, not the mechanics of it, kind of the sausage making of how they ran the campaign, which was really good, but the kind of bigger premise, which the city is unaffordable. This one is the same way. The city is unaffordable, and people who make an average of $46,000 have to take on second jobs. And so we have to have some conversation there about how do we have a situation where the people who pick up your trash, the people who watch your kids at the rec center, the people who watch your kids run through the library and tell them to slow down and be quiet and don't put that book in their book bag, are then the people who have to take a second job to live in the city that they are forced to live in by union rules. Right. And it is important to note that those same union rules allow police officers and firefighters to leave after 5 years. Right? There were many times that these rules were actually important to creating a middle class in a variety of class neighborhoods in cities.
Right, working class. So, creating, keeping the incentive, well, not incentive, but basically to stay in the city.
You're using tax receipts from a city to people who are working for that, who are living in those borders. And so invariably, you then have those people who create working to middle class to upper class neighborhoods. And so many of the places, especially on the East Coast, when we traditionally look at them, when you look at these neighborhoods and you say, where do people work that are inhabiting these middle class and working class neighborhoods and cities? They're people who work for the city as a methodology of Black economic mobility, right? And we know that labor has been a means to Black economic mobility.
Yep.
We're now seeing situations where that is no longer the case. So while we're grappling with Mayor Parker barking back at DC 33 or all the funny things you see about people loading trash places and being like, who gonna go pick up this trash? I'm not putting this trash in my back seat. And I think it's important for people to think about that. As much as people like, oh yeah, you can just take your trash to the dumpsters. If you being from Philadelphia, if you know enough about Philadelphia in the summertime, there's no shade and your trash was outside.
Yeah.
No one is putting that in their car.
Yeah, nobody trying to put that in their car.
Like, you're not putting that.
I mean,
y'all know that trash juice.
But like and I guess you gave me a good close. The point here I was going was, if a city like here tried to put in if any of the municipalities here tried to put a restriction like that on folks, the structure of where housing is and where housing is cheaper, it just wouldn't work. Like, people would have to just quit, right? And I think it's also a forgotten sort of nuance of like how white flight as a concept created these dynamics where you had a lot of cities, especially East Coast and Midwest cities, where you had people working for the public, working for the city, and taking all of their salary to surrounding suburbs or smaller cities, satellite cities, cultural enclaves, and then sort of controlling in many ways the operations and the function of a city they didn't live in. So there's just in case anybody's like, well, why would they make them live there? There is an incentive reason why you might, especially at the scale of a city like Philadelphia, again, because I think a big issue, a big challenge with folks thinking about their circumstance in our society is not acknowledging the scale of their circumstance, right? So they're like, well, I mean, this town works fine. I'm like, yeah, but that town has 10,000 people. There's 78,000 people in 4 different municipalities crossing over. So it actually is like 600,000 people. This is going to start breaking down. Like, this is going to start not working the way you think. And then getting to the thing of like, yo, yeah, you got some like wild, nasty. I mean, my trash can ain't no bed of roses outside like that. I don't be, I get in there, spray that joint down every couple, season rotations, because it's trash. Like, it did imagine you in a tight block that was built in the 1840s, and you can barely get a dumpster down it, and then somebody say, yo. Yeah, I mean, we have a moment with the labor union. We don't agree right now, so we're gonna ask you to take your trash somewhere. It's like,
so man, I want to say for the listeners and watchers, I am fortunate enough to be from Philadelphia, and with that comes a lot of shit. But one of the things that stand out in your head, Sixers winning the championship. If you're Gen X, right? If you're Gen X in Philadelphia, there's a whole host of things that stand out. Sixers winning the championship, move, right? Like, there's a whole host of stuff that we all remember. The trash strike of 86 is one that I remember. During the trash strike of 86, there were new versions of rats created. That's how it was 20 days. So just for context, it was 20 days. And there were new kinds of rats that breeded, that had never met each other. And they came together and knew each other biblically and made new rats.
Right. New generation and new formation. Like, the bigger, stronger, faster.
Yeah. Like, that's only 20 days in the middle of the summer. all the stuff says after 10 days, you're going to start to have environmental and like air factors that are going to start to harm people.
Yep.
So people can forget this kind of thing. And for those who are not aware with Philadelphia, and you kind of spoke to it, it's 30 houses on both sides. It's 60 houses with however many people in trash from however many people. With all kind of children, elders, all kind of food. People ain't really doing the composting like we might want them to. They're not in the backyard. Guess what? The backyard's concrete.
Right, and it ain't accessible, so you can't put it back there. If you put it back there, it's going to be a bigger problem because it's going to be hard.
Yeah, the raccoons is coming to your backyard. They're going to have a barbecue in your backyard and look at you. So this idea that you can't even use some of the privileges, frankly, that we all can speak on to be like, yeah, you can compost that. You put it in there and put it in the grass and then everything will be okay. No, you have these things that like the density that makes this like extra harmful. It's like heat waves in New York or heat waves in places where you don't have air conditioning, right? It just makes it so as part of cities, you have to factor this in that it's not the thing that you think it is, which goes back to my point. If the premise of a union thing is like, we can't afford to live here and none of us should have to work here and take a second job, I think we all have to contend with that idea. Yeah. I think we have to say, does someone that works for a city, should they have to take a second job to live in the city? Should they have to take, and this is another piece of this that, Mayor Parker is talking about, well, here's all the programs that I'm going to do to help people fix their homes or, get a mortgage. Right? Which on its face is great because you're doing that for the city. But the other fundamental question, if I work for the city, do I have to come to the city to help get a mortgage? Which speaks to me, the bigger piece of economic mobility. I think most of us, and this is self-included, and those of us who have worked in a municipal context or like yourself work adjacent to municipal context, we have become used to framing the world of economic mobility as what can government do to assist. Sometimes those are tax credits. Sometimes those are first home loan programs. Sometimes those are violence reduction programs that are workforce development programs. We have a myriad of them, right? Now, Philadelphia was kind of early with that stuff with OIC and stuff like that kind of was outside of government that got brought into government. So Philadelphia is a little early with that, but most cities across the country have this premise of here's how government provides economic mobility. And so what I'm grappling with and what I want to share is like, shouldn't economic mobility just mean maybe you can just make more next year than you make this year?
Right.
And we need to create the conditions for that to happen versus government at some point becoming this structure that has to say, okay, DC-33, you can come with us and get your house fixed. But if someone works for the city every day on behalf of the enterprise,
right,
isn't there a basic where we think this doesn't make sense anymore? And that's the thing that I think, and this is kind of like the meta element of this. What is the really premise of economic mobility in America today? And I would say that was the undergirding, besides pure racism and xenophobia. So let me put that first. But after racism and xenophobia, the other undergirding of today of the 24 election and successive things, the city, the campaign in New York, is this economic mobility conversation. And I think we have to wrestle with that. I think we have to wrestle with what it means and wrestle with, is labor a form of economic mobility? And what are the forms of economic mobility that just allow people who act in service of the city to live in a city? We always tend to focus, Justin, especially out where you at, focus on people who were from a place being able to return to a place, right? And the premise of that. Well, here is a more fundamental one. If you work for the place, should you be able to afford the place? And is there a role for the city to do that? And what should be the role?
And I think it's important for folks to consider Right. Like, again, these assumptions we make about job roles and space and place. And so one, is the place affordable? So I think it's a good litmus test, right? To go, could the people who work here stay around here? And I think if your answer is no, then you got to do something. We have to do something as a society, as a culture, as a structure, or at least as a policy vehicle to think about. Like, something I say, and this might be just you went way out of space to come up with that one moment. But something I I've said to folks when we engage in discussions about folks experiencing homelessness and being out of doors and all the issues that come with that. In the hit, like humans, as us, as beings, as a species, as a creature, like the only context under which someone does it, a human doesn't try to with however you're formed, try to provide somewhere for you to sleep in a condition that you would feel at peace with, is if there's an outside force that won't let you. Right. So if someone is outside of doors in our society, yes, they may have stuff that happened, drug problems, mental health, may have made a bad decision, could have got way down to medical debt, could have had some kind of crazy family situations, all those, nuance factors. But the bottom line is, they're going to someone, it's not reasonable. It's not something that humans don't do. Is they're going, well, where can I sleep? And start looking around. And so when I see someone build a tent in a gap between some stuff, that's what a human will do. Right. And a part of it also is I don't want to take from somebody else. So I'm going to try to squeeze in here. Right. So now that's you're like, man, does that mean homeless? That's just way over here. All right. So another step, say you have enough money, you're making, or you're able to earn a living, and you have a community either that you're from that you would like to stay in, you know what I'm saying, or is adjacent, like this where I'm at, this is my neighborhood. I know this, that's Miss What's the name of them. Like, I've lived in this row house right here, and I have a cognitive idea there may be other types of houses in the world that I would maybe want to live in, but I like this one, and this one is cool, and I'm all right. Having the balance of stasis that I live in a place that's mine, and I don't got to take from nobody else or infringe or harm nobody else, and I can go earn in the world, wherever that is, whether it's at the city or elsewhere. I can make the money I need so I can live here in peace. And most folks will go yeah, that's cool. That's a reasonable thing. And then we have things like, urban renewal that went, I know you like that row house, but we want to build this other thing. So we're going to take it from you, right? Again, the outside force disrupted you from look, yeah, things could be better. I could have nicer, but I'm cool because what I have is mine. And I have my dignity and my self-determination intact. Right. And so if you start scaling that idea up, right? Like a lot of us may live in a place where we feel, we do this whole aspirational dream house thing, which I got a lot of structural problems with. We do the if I want, a lot of trees, or I want this outside my house, right? So there's a lot of your self-reflection, your ideas about the world reflected in the space that you have, but also acknowledging the constraints that exist, that we all, at least to me, subconsciously deal with and engage with. And then we make choices, right? We go, look, I could maybe afford to live in that kind of house, but I don't want to live over there. And I'm going to say this in the positive context, because the negative context is basic structural racism. It's I don't want none of them people that look like this over this way. But in another context, just I could live over there, but there may be some personal cultural discomfort or access to the foods that I like, or proximity, quite frankly, to the neighborhood or the places I like the best or that I know well. So I want to stay over here. So I want to stay in a Philadelphia context. I want to stay out west. I want to stay up Strawberry Mansion. I want to stay in South Philly,
right. Southwest,
Southwest, wherever that is. For you in some other place or city, you know what I'm saying, you want to stay, in Portland, you want to stay in Northeast, you want to stay in Southeast, you want to stay out in the Southwest, you want to be, anywhere in America. Let's think of your city and start thinking of neighborhoods, and somebody going nah, this is the place I like being. I know that they got them other houses over in Pratt County, or some other place that may be further away. that I may be able to afford, but even for its challenges, I want to stay this place that I'm from. You know what I mean? All right, so I think I beat that enough. So if you think about that in the context of a place like Philly, especially, and that Union and District 33 represents also a level of, as you brought up, of structural, economic, and political organizing to be able to have something that's yours for Black folks and others. You know what I'm saying? But definitely with a centerpiece of Black folks, like, yo, look, this is our city. I mean, they got good jobs down the city, young buck. You know what I'm saying? You can get out this foolishness, man. Go ahead and get you one of them jobs down the way, right? Like these, like the actual functional dynamics of some of the things that we would fight for in terms of trying to create fair opportunities and fair structure that folks could live. They could again have efficacy, and impact on their lives, and be able to take care of themselves and their families, and live in their own degree of comfort and well-being. And so when we get down to labor and like what you pay people, like that's actually what you're talking about. You talk about how much do I have available so I can take care of myself and those I care about, right? And if that's that's the sort of labor unit and hour of time that has a cost, is what we've tacitly agreed to in our thing. So when you tell somebody like, yeah, you ain't really had a meaningful raise in a decade, you know what I'm saying? It's like, yo, somebody's like, I need a raise, B. Like it ain't, it ain't personal. I ain't mad. Like it can be personal, right, but it's a real thing. And we as a society, we get into this, I have my own, justice theory that because we have a baseline history of we used to pay people nothing as we were developing an economic system that's supposed to be based on hourly, some unit of pay for your time, but also have a root thing where it's like, remember when we used to pay people nothing? Maybe we can get back to that, right? Like, can we get back to that nothing thing? Because that nothing thing, boy, we sure can extract a lot of wealth. We don't got to pay the people who are doing the work, right? And I step up to the modern age. If you have, the one video that I saw, and I think it was NBC News 10, and I could see the brothers like just very serious, like, look, I hear what y'all talk about, but they need to pay us. And you ain't coming in this gate. Ain't nobody putting no trash in that bin. Cause we ain't asking for nothing we ain't supposed to get. We ain't asking for nothing that's unfair. We're not asking for we're not asking you your mortgage program, that's great. Man, pay me.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, we have created these structures where we acknowledge that the system doesn't work, and then we pad it. Mm-hmm. Right? We pad the system. We put all kind of other elements around the system because we tacitly acknowledge that the system as it exists is not enough for you to have what one may call either dignified or ownership, which has its own host of things in our society. Yeah. So because of that, hey, we're not going to pay you what you want, but we can give you this. And here's the other the part, and again, being from Philadelphia, there's some context to this. Yeah, when 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when nobody wanted to be in Philadelphia, when white flight was at an all-time high, when you couldn't recruit people to stay in Philadelphia once they went to Penn or Drexel or Temple or as it was called textiles back then. Yeah, Philadelphia was affordable, right? And you could live in neighborhoods and you could flourish, and transit was high functioning, and the education system was high functioning. And even though you might have said this was happening in the midst of the crack era or at the beginning of the crack era, there were hosts of ways to have a functional life as a working class citizen in the city of Philadelphia. And I think you can multiply that for cities all across the country. Yeah. Yeah. Now that is not as easy. Global capital has moved in. So, you know what I mean? I just think, like, to your point where you're talking about this dignified life, these were people who had one. These were people who saw labor and municipal unions as a methodology for economic mobility, and proud to live in the city of Philadelphia.
Yeah. And love and respect, like have love for the job, the work that they do, and like understand its impact And we have especially in this moment when we have this conversation, especially sitting on a school board about like, all pathways don't need to go to college and all like to go to the trades. Some of the time, what's not always said in that times is a lot of municipal functions are where some of those pathways would go, right? And
Absolutely.
but it comes with, we're gonna talk about what is the cost of living. if you tell me, if you encourage me to follow these routes of skill and trade development, as a way to get to, like I said, a living wage job or a role I can do, that, there's a good amount of those. Either you're going to be working for a city or a state, or working as a contractor for an entity that works for the public in some way, right? Or at least at some time, right? And so then a part of that agreement starts to be like, well, what is, as opposed to individually, like, I guess in a sense, like sort of seeking the highest possible wage you could find doing any other thing, whatever that, whether that's, I'm gonna be a corporate trader, like, like this is sort of the weird, thing we do as a society. So when you have this, when someone gets there, so like those municipal jobs and municipal spaces, a lot of times are spaces where people can like get other skills and trades, find other job opportunities. They may move to a different manager or a different systems role. But I think it also should be remind people, all of our stuff, like our society depends on like people doing all kinds of like jobs that involve waste and refuse and equipment moving and fixing things that need somebody to go turn a knob and move a thing and cleaning something else every 2 to 3 months. And like cholera is a real thing that can like like all sorts of disease and other stuff, unwellness in general, are all like, these things are like real. Like they're not, because we don't experience some of this stuff in city, or and I think many of our suburbs at this age would be very akin to cities of other ages in terms of the amount of people that are covering the space. We can have this idea that like, we can just do this with it, or you can and something, but like we read these systems to work. Secondly, and I like that, thank you for sharing that article that went back to the Rendell history, because the other thing that a lot of places do is and especially a lot of developing, like places that have developed after the 70s, 80s, or expanded definitely after 70s, 80s, usually, so a lot of those functions are contracted out to private companies, what I mean? So waste management and smaller ones is actually there's, so like here there's a really strong what's the thing? I want to say Road City. Shout out to them. Hopefully, I got it right. If I don't, Refuse, which is a black-owned company that does trash pickup. There's another one that serves by my way. It's not black-owned, but it's just independent company, which is a pathway, right? Not saying that it's not, but understand that a part of that story talking about like basically the threat, because people don't remember the late 80s and 90s when unions was under attack and was like, look, you don't do what we doing, we're gonna shut all this down and we're going to contract it out to a private company, right? So again, that neoliberalism, and the still ongoing thing where the amount of like, if you live somewhere, like, again, I live somewhere where the water systems are managed by municipal bodies. They don't contract out to what's the French company? I can't remember their name. It's a French company that owns a whole lot of water systems, and it's I don't know. Anyway, we're not sponsored. It's not a judgment of them or say they're good or they're bad. It's just saying it's a thing, right? Right. Then
so you don't want to sponsor us
in case you want to, we don't want to cut our nose off, fight our face.
Call us.
America's a cold please, man. Like the but there's like private companies that contract with governments, and if you, more than likely, if you live anywhere that's really developed after the 80s, you probably are either paying a semi-private or a private company secondhand through your public administration to do something that is a public service function, like water. Y'all, some places y'all live, you got these big wild HOAs. You got the big wild HOA because you probably don't have a municipal road authority body, right? Like there's all these things don't exist out of nothing, right? And a city like Philadelphia that is an older city, so it has most of all them folks are city workers that do most of those work, do most of those jobs. They're not all contracted out to this, and you know, I think folks don't realize that, they don't see that. So then they're like, well, why are they beefing? But then also, when other stuff in the city is not collecting enough taxes for property, they're not connecting, they're giving breaks to this and that to try to get this other economic thing going. You also start running into, we can't pay for this thing. We can't pay for the enterprise. And I like that you know that framing. I appreciate that. I'm gonna take that with me somewhere. You know what I'm saying? To work. And you know, it's something for us to think about. Like, can we get our thinking around, like, yo, you know, getting somebody a deal off a 10-year tax abatement so you can build this set of townhomes? It all sounds great and it gets people in the door. But is this adding to an idea that we're gonna not be able to afford the municipal and the social, the economic structure around to actually take care of everything else around those townhomes or this other building, or if people don't remember,
I'm gonna say it's a balance, right? Because again, 1990s Philadelphia, when you come to Philadelphia now, and you know James Beard and Michelin's, and just a different town than what existed. Some of it was the decisions that hard calls they made around, like, we're going to go on 10-year tax abatements to let people build stuff. So now you're incentivized they're moving their capital to your city versus the capital of another city.
Mm-hmm.
That's real. And the tax receipts, maybe not from the person that did it, but the whole host of other things that occurred, you know, the theory of that case, then you start to see that. As cities, you got to think about when did you get enough, right? Like, at what point did it make sense to do that? What point does it make to bring it down? But most things are, once you give somebody something, taking it back is hell.
Yeah.
Right? Because I gave it to you.
Right. It's like, wait a minute, you want it back?
You want it back? What do you mean you want it back? Or the next person that comes with capital, right? So again, that's why I'm saying both of these things, Madami, this, are both representations of the American city and how it's structured. And so, like I was speaking on, if, you know, in Philadelphia, they just passed a budget that would do an $800 million missing middle housing bond. So in Philly, I think different from most cities where the focus is on the most folks with the most need, the 30 and 50 AMI areas. Philly is more, okay, a lot of people own their homes. So it's less of creating affordable housing, you know, 50 units, 100 units of affordable housing. Is more, you already live somewhere. How do you stabilize where you already live?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And somebody probably owned it because in your family, because it was such a high percentage of home ownership. But that's the mobility conversation. If you just give me about 5% a year, maybe I don't have to worry about y'all.
Right. Right. If I got a little more bread, right. If I'm making a little bit more bread every year, and I can look and go, I'm gonna make this much more for the next,
right. I know I'm gonna make this much more.
I'm gonna be there.
Here are the decisions I'm making. And that's why I'm touching on this whole, like, economic mobility versus paying a person versus the city industrial complex that says, well, we create enough programs, ostensibly that'll lead people to mobility.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or it'll lead people to at least comfort, not necessarily mobility.
Right. You'll be able to get by, or you'll keep,
which is the deeper thing, if we're being honest. That is not about mobility.
Mm-hmm.
It's about comfort. Now, if you get hit with a tsunami like Portland or a lot of other cities across the country where it happened maybe so fast or it happened so intensely that you are, in a sense, providing comfort. You are just saying, hey, if you want to just stay here, you can stay there.
Mm-hmm.
You're not saying you want to build wealth for your family. You're not necessarily saying that this is connected to education. You're not necessarily saying it's connected to none of that stuff. It's just stay right there, which is like, sometimes this is the, you know, since I say something unpopular every podcast now, sometimes we just be creating museums and mausoleums for Black people in neighborhoods. Yeah. Sometimes it's a pretty museum and sometimes it's a fucking mausoleum because they're dying there. And there's no wealth transferred in any way out of that, you know, box senior home. Every senior deserves to have dignity and be comfortable in their days. But we also have to become, that's not a solution to a thing. That, again, that's just a response to the fact that since there's no mobility, since seniors who worked all their time and had, got their pensions, but still don't make enough, and their families moved and they can't afford that house. We tell them to sell that house and move in here. Yeah. And so if we're making it all about trash juice and, the big rat that they put outside when, for the scabs, right? Philadelphia, they love putting that big ass rat outside.
Before we go too far there, because I don't know. I mean, if people watched Abbott Elementary, which you brought up, where they did the episode about the bus strike,
yeah,
like they may not. Again, it was one of them cultural moments. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I am from a place where like it was like, yo, you can't be crossing those picket lines, like you scab, like everybody. You ain't like you ain't cool, and like it could get real serious for you.
Yeah, respect this, and I mean even to the point, I called my pop, and he was like, I'm on it. They need to get them people their money. Get them people their money, man. Them people pick up stuff you would never pick up. I mean, him and my, they was making sense. They put up with stuff you would never put up with at your job.
Yeah.
Right. For the idea of being able to work there and hopefully retire with some form of a pension, which is a whole other politics of the pension and the hybrid pension versus defined benefit. So these are the things that are undergirdings of cities that I think we don't think about when sometimes we had these conversations about like how cities function and where people are and why they left and all this kind of stuff. These are parts of the pieces, and traditionally labor had, unions and municipal employment has been a part of how Black folks, we over-index on municipal employment.
Yeah. Well, and just for those that don't know, in a lot of places, municipal and definitely at the federal government are some of the few places where like they actually play by the hiring rules that the document says. So that's so it'd be like, yeah, like so when I made it like, yo, young, we help you get a job down at the city, and like somebody could take you through, help you, like, here's what you got to put on your resume, here's stuff you got to get ready, or you did all right, man, you qualify, man, go in there, and if you get the interview, you straight. Right, you might have to pass the drug test or whatever, right? But otherwise, you can get in and you can start doing something and make a meaningful wage. And there's a whole lot of other places where our community gets excluded. Like, I could bring up the studies, like if your name sound Black, that you don't get callbacks, like all of that stuff is still in play and real. You know what I'm saying? And often, especially if you have a strong union, you have something that if your workplace experience is having issues, whether they be racial or otherwise, you do actually have a mechanism to go, hey, man, you ain't able to talk to me like that down here. Right. They ain't supposed to do that to me. They did this something funny with my check. They messing with my hours, right? All stuff that for our community, traditionally, we ain't always had them protections going into private or corporate entities. Granted, there's some places that had ethical actors. I'm not saying everybody never had no ethical actors, but I'm saying it's a very real like thing. I hope folks will understand that, like, working. My mother worked for the state of New Jersey for my whole life, right? So I'm from a household that was able to have a stable upbringing in life because did a vital function in a government space that provided mental health care to all kinds of New Jerseyans, right? Which is good. That's a good thing for our society, for people to be able to do that. Like, it's not, this sort of idea, if it's still living, that like there should be some step down or disdain for the public function. It's sort of like, well, I mean, who you think, like, there's some stuff that should be our responsibility as a society, as I see it, right? And there should be some respect there. So like the jobs that folks do and the respect for, and even in this moment too, where folks are sort of touting this idea of like, the current administration at least having the tacit endorsement of like blue collar or working class workers, or at least a more significant, pocket, right? Well, part of that's who this is. I mean, not that I want to complicate the situation, but if that's y'all man, some of y'all have told us, y'all said he about the working man. He gonna make a call on District 33 behalf. I mean, that would be a whole wild thing, and I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying, like, this is the sort of the level of stuff, and I be wondering with folks from the outside looking in. I mean, I think it's been positive to see the amount of stuff where it seems like a lot of people like, man, pay them people. Like, what you talk about, Mayor? Like, yeah. You talk about the pay and the contract, man. Pay them, man. Find their money. Find it. It's y'all got it somewhere in there. Find
right,
it.
right.
Like y'all got it.
Like y'all got it.
Y'all got it. You good
somewhere,
for it.
man.
You know what I'm saying? Cut something over there, move some other stuff around, juggle some contracts.
And the thing is, and again, want to honor all the people that are working in the city to make the city run at its highest from a kind of administrative level. They still haven't said this is how much extra it will cost us, and this is why we can't do it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I want them to say that, but from a pure strategy, you would have to tell me how much. If you don't give it to them, if I give it to them, here's what gets cut.
Yeah.
And then let people kind of make the call. Like, okay, well, shit, if we can't do that. Okay, well, we can't do that. But it was important to have these people to pick up this damn trash before we get a new version of rats. Yeah. Or cholera, or kind of like stuff happens in your neighborhood where, we already got places with very little grass, and now you're going to exacerbate people's asthma, right? Like, there are real effects of this. But I would say, for me, on a meta level, whether it's happening in Philadelphia, whether it was happening in Chicago, whether all these things are like, how does the city work? And often people who would, I think, frame themselves as progressives are often talking about how the city doesn't work for people. But I think we have to start saying, well, how would the city work for people? What are the decisions we would make that actually act in the interest of vox populi, so to speak?
Yeah.
And not just say the city doesn't work, but actually say how the city would work.
Yeah. And
make the decisions around it. And I think that's the New York thing. I think, Mayor Parker, my take is you got to pay them people. But it's like, how does this work? And when we see something happening like this, and it's not a racial element, right? It's, not even a class element, because frankly, the union leader probably makes more than the mayor, right? So this is something else, right? And I think, but the underpinning of what this is truly about how does the city function and who does it, how do we make sure that people have access to mobility, and to the degree that the government is responsible for it, doing it in ways that actually provides the outcomes that people say they want for people.
Yeah. And I think that is like my sort of deeper thought about this is from what we're advocating or fighting to try to make, a beef over living wages, quite frankly, should not be, it's something that we should be working to not have, right? That the people that do the work that we depend on have what they need, are getting paid a reasonable wage, getting paid at a means that we can afford. And, I have my own just larger subject that, my justice critique, research hypothesis is that basically we've built an entire thing as terms of society that we kind of can't afford. And we do all this shifting and shuffling around, or at least we can't afford with some of the ways we want to engage with it, right? So if you have, you bought millions of thousands of miles, millions of miles of roads that have been built, and with no viable plan to make sure we can pay for them. You center driving over public transit and then go, just don't go to that one area over there because they can't take care of their roads, but where you live, the roads is cool. That's because the roads is new, but in 15 years, them roads need to be repaved, and you don't have no viable plan in place to repay them. It's going to be an issue. Everything that we build, whether private property or not, depends on some sort of public access, depends on the public world around it for it to be viable for you. And I think that tension that is about mobility, is about self-determination, and how does the world, how do you have the access to make the space around you reflect the way you want to live, not just in a physical way, so to speak, this is a the aesthetic. That's what I meant. But in a like, yeah, I want my elders to be able to stay in the neighborhood, till to their final days. While also being a place that if somebody has a young family that they don't think I can't stay around here. Also a place where and again, it is values where folks can have their celebratory functions, whether they be family milestones, successes, birthdays, or just a community, just random community exuberance that we just happy. We want to have a function. Right. You can still do that in your neighborhood or in your space, right? Like these sort of living things, and that the infrastructure, the access, the rules to do it, all those things don't impede that sort of sense of being who you are. And I think that is sort of like, and I appreciate that you brought up, like, that is sort of the bigger issue that I'm concerned with. I'm not here. I'm not trying to negotiate anybody's the results of the situation, but to say like, for this is happening with the city of Philadelphia, but also I think it bears in mind for one to think about, like, well, what is what are the constraints or the constrictions? Are we moving towards a world as folks who are engaged in policy or in system change and system development, system design and thinking and movement of people, what are we going towards, and how do we start to build in or talk about, if we want to have, if you want to go to multi-generational living, right? What's the infrastructure you need for that? What are the supports? What needs to be around? Do the mortgage rules we have work well with people sharing, bigger houses or making smaller, like all these details, I think. So pay them people. Pay them people get this thing done.
The most important, get the trash out the streets. Get the trash out the street. Because also, I'm gonna say this: a lot of people, if you've never had to experience a strike, you don't know what it feels like to then tell kids you can't go outside. Because no one's sending their kids outside with trash outside. Yeah. And the rec centers, half of the rec centers closed because guess what? DC 33 also
run the rec centers. So run the libraries.
Think about the things that people could take for granted because of how these systems work, which then tell people that their city doesn't work, which is what then tells people that they have to leave their city and go somewhere else for it to work better. Right. And that's to me, the bigger thing, especially when it comes to Black flight, whether you went by choice or by force. When you have this concept of flight and how cities don't work, and then people are like, well, let me go to the South where it all works, where it all works because it kind of doesn't have any rules, right?
Or don't have no stuff,
right?
Don't have no shared stuff. Right. Just as a note. So I was reading the article about this. It was a post. I think it was about something in the Houston area, and it was talking about the land use, and then some of the people in the comments was like, yo, we don't got no land use laws. You can do whatever the hell you want here, more or less. So what are you talking about? They shouldn't put this there or that there. I think I shared it with you. And you know what I'm saying? It's like, yo, you can't have both. You can't say there's sort of rules, but then there's not rules. Because
rules we would like you to abide by, even though there are no rules. So you got there and built what you wanted. But then when we get here and want to have a party, you don't like that.
Right. You don't like that. Rules. There's no rules. You said ain't nothing on the book say we can't meet up in this block right here and have this event. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like it is what you can be mad about it. Now we could have a conversation to figure out how we could, maybe we could tone it down on certain days or move over, make an agreement amongst the people. But you've decided you don't want that kind of government where you live. So you don't get them be like, oh, these people are the police should come down. Because the police are like, actually, I don't have no rules I could actually enforce over there. So, y'all be cool.
Here's my thing as being, just because you don't like it doesn't make it wrong.
That's right. That's right. So, all right. I think that's enough for
pay them people.
Pay them people, man. Go ahead and, also just a lesson for everybody. If you explaining, you're losing. If you the person in charge, she trying hard to be explaining and not be losing, but I was like, you still losing, sis. You gotta go ahead. You gotta go ahead and Tell them we talked this morning in the spirit of the 4th of July. We want to come together, find a way.
Together. Philadelphia, one Philadelphia.
Right. So with that, I say peace.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to Good Brothers. Thank you to my good brother, I'm Majestic. Good Brothers is a part of or inspired by and attached to the Ask Your Oldhead podcast, and you can always find it on the Ask Your Oldhead podcast feed. Any day now, as you've seen the clips, you'll be able to find it on YouTube. But in the interim, if you want to support the podcast, please search Justice Rajee on Patreon and become a patron, or wherever you listen. Like, rate, subscribe, share, tell your friends about it. Go pick a fight with somebody behind something we said and be like, they said it, so it must be true. You know what I'm saying? Whatever it takes. But most of all, feel free to reach out via email or on the interwebs and just listen, because the heart of this is trying to create and keep some things going and then generate space for growth and development and whatnot. So thank you for listening, and don't take no wooden nickels or stand up to the rowboat. And again, apologies for the delayed release. Brother had a lot moving, but I think the thoughts and ideas are still salient. Shout out to District 33 and everybody that's out there working hard for theirs. So with that, we say peace.